Welcome to this webinar series. I'm Janet Pilcher. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you for taking time to be with your colleagues and me to learn, grow, and reflect on being our best as leaders. I'm honored today to have Dr. KK Owen, one of our leader coaches, join me. She'll be joining me a little bit later and have connections and conversations with me as we continue to focus on the topic at hand today. So I'm just, again, thrilled to have you all with us and taking time out of your busy schedule to enjoy our time together. You know, last year I published Hardwiring Excellence in Education, and that's the foundation of the work we do with leaders like you. I start today by asking, what does it mean to hardwire something? You know, hardwired refers to a direct fixed link between a device and the power source. Hardwiring means systems we count on are reliable. We count on critical systems to work, and we know what happens when they don't work. It makes our life extremely uncomfortable. If you think about that and then think about our leadership, people count on us as leaders. We're the ones who are responsible for creating hardwire systems that our teams can depend on that work. Our teams rely on us. And that's an awesome and honorable responsibility. As leaders, we want our actions to show you can count on me. Our actions may say, I'm reliable because I'm committed to working with my team to apply systems and processes that people trust and believe in. It's a really important part of our leadership work. So hardwiring then is non-negotiable for leaders. And that's why it's important to me and where I've spent most of my time in my life work dedicated to creating great leaders and trying to be one myself. And think about it. Hardwiring is integral to many things we depend on. Our appliances, our cars. The goal is to minimize risk for those things that are standard practices, how we live each day. When something breaks, it's disruptive. The more integral it is in our lives, the more serious the miswiring is. If that system continuously breaks, we lose confidence that it will work. It's unreliable, disruptive to our lives. And we've all felt that when our systems at home are broken. Yeah, I have an RV. I expect my systems to be hardwired, or otherwise I'm stranded somewhere. My camping then becomes fearful. I camp in fear. I lack trust in the systems that are connected to making the RV work, to making the RV go. On my last camping trip, the slide outs, that's part of the RV, they failed to come in when we were checking out, when we were completing our stay. I'd push the button and nothing. I can't drive down the road with my slide outs out. So I was stranded and panicked by having to be out of the RV park at a particular time, at a checkout time, and I was stranded. I had to call for help. And you know, when you call for help like that, you pay a hefty fee. And the verdict? A loose wire that was never hardwired in the right way. Now, when I go camping again, I hope that darn wire is hardwired. I've asked for multiple checks on it. I'm not trusting of it. But now I'm wondering, what else is not hardwired? And the more incidents that occur, the more apprehensive I get until, if it keeps occurring and it doesn't work, I may abandon the RV, become disengaged, give up. We want to build then reliable and stable systems that minimize risk. When our systems are reliable, we can apply more agility and change within our organization, but it's hard to make those changes that we have to do every day when we don't have systems we can count on. We have to trust our systems to be hardwired for us to take risk. Here's where leadership is key. In our educational systems, we need our people to help us build those hardwired systems that lead to excellence. Our professional work environment becomes too disruptive when we fail to have hardwired systems, just like what we experience in our lives. So people have asked me then, what's key to our leadership as we hardwire excellence? And I've spent time trying to answer that question. It was asked of me last year at our higher ed conference. And so when I tried to answer that question the next day, I began to put a visual together, a wheel, a hardwiring excellence in education wheel. And so this is the wheel. At the center of that wheel is harvesting wins and bright spots every day, recognizing those bright spots every day. We're going to spend a little bit more time on that today. And then we're going to spend some time on the other aspects of the wheel in the next two sessions. But it's providing a clear direction, reviewing the brutal facts to improve, being really honest with ourselves. When we have that direction, knowing where we're going and being honest about where we are. And building our teams in conversations about how we take the right steps to get there. And the only way we can do that is to have meaningful conversations with people. And when we do, we pay ridiculous attention to what they say so that we can integrate that into our actions to know what are the winning moves that will help us achieve excellence. The parts of this wheel, it will focus our attention on what it takes to hardwire excellence in education, in our everyday practice. And as we talked about what hardwiring means, we know how important that is. So again, today, we're going to focus on the wheel at a high level, and then we're going to talk about the centerpiece. But before we do that, let's take a minute. And I'd like for you to reflect on this question or this statement. Take a minute. What's on your mind when you think about hardwiring excellence in education? Feel free to add that to the chat so that we can see what your thoughts are. I'm going to be quiet for a few minutes or just a minute and give you a chance to reflect on the information I've shared. Take a minute. Thank you for sharing. Keep sharing. Thank you. Thank you for sharing and would love to look at the thoughts that you have as we continue today and as we go into our next session in the webinar. Now, I'm going to bring forward KK Owen. KK, I'd love for you to join me and begin to connect with our audience. So KK, thank you for being with us today. And I can't think of a better person to share some of the experiences that you have in the field as you are applying the concepts of the wheel that we see in front of us. KK, take it away.
Thank you, Janet. It is a pleasure to be here with you today. And I want to talk about what I think about the wheel and then how I use it. First, I believe that this wheel is the how, that is the companion piece to our flywheel. Those of you that know our flywheel know that in the middle there is purpose, worthwhile work, and making a difference, what every employee wants to be connected to. And around the outside, we have inspiring workplaces, building strengths, and accelerating results. So that flywheel is the why and the what. This wheel is the how. We can break down the different parts of the wheel and focus on them individually when we work with our partners, or we can use the wheel as a whole, sort of a big picture of sorts. And as with all the other parts of our work in organizational excellence, we see in this wheel both culture and strategy. Relationships are key to success in leadership. And when we think about what our people want, what our employees need more than anything else, that's a relationship, being seen, being heard, being noticed and valued for good work. In the bottom two sections of the wheel, we see engage in meaningful conversations and pay ridiculous attention to others. And as leaders reflect on their actions as a leader, if those result in meaningful conversations, and if they are paying ridiculous attention, what comes to mind is what we teach leaders to do every day: rounding, results rollout, reward and recognition, feedback loops, effective performance conversation. All of those very specific leader actions fit into these two sections of the wheel. So being able to reflect in these two spaces forces leaders to think about how often, how well, how consistent am I? How effective am I at doing these two things? It allows leaders to really gauge how hardwired they are, how consistently they execute in these two areas. We see the strategy work for leaders in the top two sections. Provide a clear direction. In practice, that looks like a robust strategic plan, followed by annual scorecards for each school and each department. There is that clear direction. One thing we often hear is we're doing too much. We can't focus on anything because we have so many things to focus on. Annual scorecards bring that clarity. Done well, they're very limited in scope. They're aligned directly to the strategic plan and the direction of the organization, and they contain clear, time-bound, measurable goals. That is the clear direction that everyone needs. If you look at the second section up there, review brutal facts, that brings out the ownership in our work with leaders. When we're coaching leaders, this is an area that takes us a while to get to. Nobody wants to look at the brutal facts, but we have to. And more than that, we have to bring others along with us into owning the brutal facts of our organization. So I think starting with reviewing brutal facts, facing them as owners, using that sense of urgency that builds, facing them with our teams instead of blaming or judging our teams, that's when we can really start to accelerate our improvement efforts. I see this being done very well in high-performing organizations on a weekly basis. Leaders who are leading with those meaningful conversations and paying that ridiculous attention to others, that means facing those brutal facts, whether it's lagging test scores, declining enrollment, inability to recruit and retain teachers, managing low performance in employees. all of those things that are brutal facts. When leaders can themselves face it, lead others to do it with ownership, no blame, no judgment, there's a great place to start improvement. So overall, I think that this wheel provides a great opportunity for leaders to self-assess how consistently they are executing in each of those 4 sections of the wheel. And that brings growth on the part of leaders and on the part of an organization, being able to see where we are, use consistent practices, hardwire our work, and intentionally move toward where we would like to be. So those are my ideas about how we use this wheel.
Yeah, so good, KK. And I love how you took the principles and the tactics and hardwiring excellence in education and really interconnected those to the wheel. You know, they're the how-tos, right? There's the how-tos to how we really hardwire excellence in our schools and in our districts and in our organizations. And you know what really struck me as you were talking is one reason I created the wheel as a visual for us to work from, because we go into the how-tos, but it's like we've got to see the picture of the how as we dive into those how-tos. Is, you know, the question continued to come up, like, how do we get people involved? How do we engage people? And you know, I'm like, the concept of what you're talking about, strategy and culture and the interconnection of those two with the tools and tactics that you talked about, that's how you get people engaged. It's not the fairy dust that sprinkles down to say, boof, you know, today we're going to be engaged. And, you know, I think about what I was talking about with my RV, KK. And I could become, you know, as much as I might love camping and the feeling that I get, if it's too hard and the systems don't work, I'm going to become disengaged pretty quickly. It's going to be a chore versus a way for me to be enriched. Does that make sense, KK?
That absolutely makes sense. And we see that very often when we come into organizations. There are people who are disengaged. They have sort of given up. They see systems that are broken. And from their viewpoint, they don't see efforts being taken that they can see to improve systems. And they are sitting in that place of, I'm just going to come to work and do my job, but I'm not going to be an owner. I'm not going to trust. I'm not going to really be engaged. And that's problematic for sure.
Absolutely. So what we're talking about is this wheel brings intention. We have to do things intentionally. And so as we continue and with this webinar, we're going to dive deep into very specifics on how-tos as we go through the next 2 series. But on this webinar, we're going to go on to the how-tos of what does it mean to start at the center, and why are recognizing bright spots, harvesting those wins at the center of the flywheel. And, you know, when I think about harvesting, you know, the wins, as you read my book, you know, for some reason, I thought harvesting wins was just a common term that people used. And people are like, what do you mean by harvesting wins? And it took me back to a time when I was working the farm with my grandfather. I was teaching and had summers and I needed to earn extra money. And he always had a project. And he said, Janet, let's grow some watermelons. Let's harvest the watermelons and let's go sell these watermelons on the side of the road. Well, I was excited. I was ready to do that. Well, until the watermelons grew and we started harvesting them. And I realized that you have to actually pick up heavy things off the ground, lift them onto the trailer as you're harvesting them. And so my point in saying that is, even though we look at bright spots and recognition, it feels so good. But the work is hard work and intentional work. And we don't just get the outcome because it feels good. It's the underlying hard work that goes into it that brings the benefit at the end. So when we think about going back to when systems are hardwired, it's important for us to have hardwired systems to gain trust. And we work that center of this wheel as a first step. And hardwiring systems is a bit of the chicken and the egg, if you think about it. We need hardwired systems to build trust, but we also need our teams to help us hardwire those systems. So we got to work back and forth. So where do we start? We start with building that emotional bank account. Building that emotional bank account, we start with our last principle. So we always start with the last first, principle 9, focused on recognition and gratitude. That we're looking for what's right. rather than what's wrong. We note what's right. We act on what's right. And we recognize what's right with great intention, harvesting, putting that effort in each and every day. So, KK, I'm going to ask you, how do you do that? What are the things you can share with us as you're working in the field?
I agree with you, everything you said, Janet, and really the win really is right there in the middle for leaders. When they can get to the center of this wheel, now improvement is accelerated. And again, we see this focus in the center of the wheel on noticing and valuing good work. And again, I'm reminded of that's the thing that employees want and need from leaders more than anything else, being appreciated and knowing what they do every day matters and is making a difference. That's principle 9. Savvy leaders understand this, and they know that connecting appreciation to what the organization is about, the goals of the organization, the values of the organization, that allows their employees to feel connected to those things as well. So in coaching our partners around the country, I have noticed good leaders do this intentionally, not randomly. As leaders mature, they become less random and more intentional and more systematic in their improvement efforts. And the center of this wheel provides a great example of that. Leaders and employees often find themselves in that reactive mode. We're just responding to the crisis of the day, reacting to the issue of the moment. Harvesting wins and noticing bright spots is never an emergency. It's never a crisis. So leaders have to discipline themselves and learn this behavior of intentionally doing this daily harvesting of the wins and the bright spots, or it doesn't ever get done. Many of our partners have developed systems, some simple, some more sophisticated, of harvesting what they do themselves and what they invite and encourage others within their organization to do as well. One very simple way is a daily reminder. What's a win today? What's a bright spot I noticed today? That takes about 5 seconds as a daily reminder on your calendar. If you spend that 5 seconds a day, by the end of the week, you have a collection of things that you've noticed and harvested. Then you have to do something with that. So a weekly calendar appointment to take action, call it out, notice those wins, harvest and showcase those bright spots with thank you notes, shout outs, so that people know that what they're doing makes a difference. One example of this is how many of our organizations recognize those who are living out the values consistently every day. NIA in Illinois has a digital system called Caught Living Our Values that invites peers up and down the organization, leaders and employees alike, to recognize each other for doing good work and then aligning that to one or more of their values. It's a simple system. You put in the employee's name, what they did, and what's the value that you would connect that to. Just having the system doesn't make it work. What makes it work is that consistently calling it out, doing something with what people are putting into the system. So that once a week, that once a month, here are all the wins we've noticed that you have called out as employees. So an important part of the system is not to build the system, but to remind people to use it, remind people of how it impacts our work that we do every day. In this win, we get those daily bright spots, those daily spotlights on what really matters, and it's noticeable to everyone. It's not hidden behind the scenes. Another example that we've noticed in the last couple of years is several of our partners are using videos, often produced by kids, by students in their system. They are very entertaining vignettes that are intended to showcase employees who are demonstrating a value on a daily basis. 2 partners who have done this very well recently are North Clackamas in Oregon and Portage in Michigan. They both have a focus on creating these videos that really tie people and connect people to this idea of harvesting wins and bright spots every day. The big win that we're after happens so slowly and over a long time that we often don't notice it on a daily basis. We don't notice it that we're improving. It takes a system of noticing and harvesting daily. Those tiny bright spots, those little wins, that helps us get to the big win and the results that we want to achieve.
Thank you, KK, and just love the examples of our partners. And I know that we probably have some partners on our webinar today who could share some of their same experiences. There's nothing more important. It seems, again, so simple, something that's so common sense that people always tell us, but it's intentional everyday harvesting, intentional everyday harvesting. So before we conclude today and before before you get back into your busy schedule, I want you to take a few minutes again, if you would, and just reflect on what's your takeaway. What is your takeaway from thinking about harvesting those wins and bright spots? I'm going to be quiet for about 30 seconds and give you a chance to reflect on that. And if you want to put in the chat, feel free to do that. But think for a minute, take a minute to reflect. What can I do? What did I learn? What's meaningful to me? Take a minute. Thank you. Thank you for reflecting, engaging, and thinking through an action that you can take. So as you leave today, here's what I hope you do. Find a way to chronicle at least one bright spot a day. They're everywhere, you all. We know it. We see them every day, all the time. Chronicle at least one bright spot a day, and then a way to share that one positive thing a day with others. What system will you use to share that bright spot and recognize one a day? That's one reliable action that you can easily hardwire in your organizations that will build trust and reliability in your work. It's a starting point. It's not everything, but it's the starting point of how we move forward to hardwire excellence and build those hardwired systems. It will indeed make a difference. And as we are continuing to think about hardwiring, we'll continue to dig deep into the webinars and talk about the various aspects of the wheel, the connection of what KK said from strategy to culture, and specifically some tactics that you can take away or think a little bit differently about. We're looking forward to celebrating wins at What's Right in Education. That's coming up. Some of you are going to be there. If you're not, please join us. It's our partners talking about what's right in education, and when they face challenges, they talk about those challenges, and then they talk about what's right in the way they face those challenges. And we'll also then continue, as I mentioned, with our webinars, looking at 2 additional webinars connected to this series. Next time, really talking about how we face the brutal facts, set to that clear direction, talking about strategy. And I, again, thank you for your time and engagement. I hope I get a chance to connect with you again next time. If you have any questions, please do not hesitate to reach out to me or anyone on our team. We'd love to be helpful to you. And as you leave today, think about this and take this with you. Harvest wins and share them to make a difference in the lives of others. Thank you all. Have a great day.